So I kind of rewrote this sermon this morning when I realized Will was going to be here. And I wanted to kind of point it to the spirit of his generation. So, if you're not there, if you're not in your 20s and you feel that spiritual angst, then if you think church should be really just all kinds of ready for the 1950s to return, just get out a crossword puzzle for the next 15 minutes or so. This is one of the 2 last weeks for our summer series on questions. And these are questions that you asked about faith and God and life and death. Last week we looked at a question that on first glance could simply be about ethics. What are you supposed to do in your life? How are you supposed to act? But I doubt any of you really came here for an ethics lecture. And really anyone who thinks I'm qualified to give a lecture on morality doesn't know all the skeletons back in there. So we're going to leave that away. Instead, last week what we did is we said we're a church, so we're going to offer a sanctified reply. We didn't look at just what is the right thing to do but in any situation, but how can you try and fail and try again to follow God's call in your life. With all the mistakes and the confusion and the hesitation and the forgiveness and the inspiration all wrapped into what it means to try to be God's disciples. And then a few weeks ago, it started out with really an existential kind of a question. Why are we here? What's the meaning of life? But this isn't a freshman philosophy class, and some of you, maybe slept through your freshman philosophy class. So we tried to take that question and what is the meaning of life, and we framed it spiritually. This is a beautiful creation, and we are special parts of it. We are called to care for it and to care for each other. And if we have any purpose in this world, it has to start and end with love. The week before that, or a couple weeks, it was a question that you easily could have asked your psychiatrist or your counselor. And the people in those fields, they have heard this question over and over. What am I supposed to do with all the suffering and the failure and the emptiness in my life? And you've probably had that kind of question. But when someone starts to ask it this way, why is there evil in the world at all? Not just in my life, but why is there evil in the world, and why does it cause so much pain, and how are we supposed to respond? Those sorts of questions get us toward a deeper understanding of how the world works, how God works, how we are related to God. And so to that, we replied with some thoughts about how God never gives up in our life. We looked at the amazing fact that people who go through such difficult things somehow find a way through the pain. And even in your life, it might not ever be perfect, but it can be better and it can be whole. So today, we could ask this question, we could ask your question from a purely sociological sort of angle. We could ask it in a way that behavioral scientists do. We could just look at what the idea of God does for us. We could address it the kind of way, if anyone's read those books by angry British guys who try to prove God's demise, like Hitchens and Dawkins and Dennett and all those other foolish guys, who try to squeeze God into this tiny little idea and stuff him into a textbook. I don't have anything nice to say to them, so just to them. But instead, our question today is about the church. So it's for the church, it's by the church to try to have a reply. And it's a tough question. It's the sort of question that many of you have asked in your life. It's the sort of question that lots of people ask in their life now. It's a question that is most real when your life has some kind of spiritual disturbance in it. Let me put it this way, the way I have asked the question. It kind of went like this. Hansen, if I wasn't a pastor, would I go to church? Or simply, why should I go to church? This church? Sure. Yeah, if I lived here, I think y'all are pretty nice. I've already got to meet you. I know kind of what's going on here, so I might come here. But if I lived somewhere else, and I didn't know the people who were in the pews, I didn't know the music that would happen, would I come in? Would I visit? Would I get involved? Would I believe what the fool up here is saying? If I didn't have myself a life of reassuring faith stories, would I go in for religion at all, with all the baggage that it brings? Because there's a lot of baggage. Now, the way someone here put the question on their little green card was like this. Very simple. What's the point of religion? I don't know if you're sitting there, if you're the one that wrote that. But yeah, what is the point? What is the point? People who come here, you might get fellowship or inspiration or guidance, or maybe you get some therapy or a place to make yourself a better person or to serve the poor or anything like that. You might get that stuff. That's all here. Or at least we hope that's here. That's what we're trying to do here. That's what good churches try to do. But is that the point? Or are those just benefits that come alongside being church? Consider it this way. There's plenty of research out there that religious people, all sorts of religions, doesn't matter how conservative or liberal or where you live around the country, anything, but religious people are healthier, they live longer, they're happier, their kids do better at school. Is that the point of going to church? Is that just byproducts? So to get a little personal, if we really wonder what the point is, whatever the point is, are we doing it? Are we doing it well? Are we doing it at all? Are we doing a good job of being religious? Someone else on their green card apparently thought that a lot of churches don't do a good job of being religious, because this is how they asked the same kind of question. They put it kind of as a prayer. They said, God, why does your church treat others the way you don't? Sting. I wish I could just focus on the positives and just the good news and not the bad news. But the fact is, that question is real for a lot of people who pass by our open doors. And that question is real for a lot of people who come into our open doors. I don't think we can shy away from the fact that religion has hurt a lot of people. And that Christianity has been and can be pretty mean. Of course, the Crusades and Westboro Baptist and the Lord's Resistance Army, but I could talk for hours about disappointing churches around here that do disappointing things. I could go on about good churches and otherwise good people who do hurtful things in the name of God, and you could too. We all have that story. Now big oil, some of us can complain a lot about big oil. And some of us could say a lot about big business. If we want to sign something to complain about how big business ruins the financial markets, first signature right here. Or big tobacco, what it does to people, how it abuses their health. Oh, I could rail against that. But big religion, it has probably broken more people than all those others combined. Broken them spiritually, and broken them financially, and broken them emotionally. It has taken advantage of people. That can't be the point of religion. Because if religion is just some opiate to fool a bunch of people into a false comfort, or if it's just some sick way for a few men to get a little bit more power, well, we should get the heck out of this building and ignore this idea of a childish, fear-mongering, angry God. No one left. This is how I approach that. Because years ago, I had to have back surgery. Somebody had back surgery this week, and it was scary, right? Yeah, it was scary. So I met with my surgeon guy, and they said he was the best back surgeon in all of Boulder. Everyone said he was the best guy. So we talked about the procedure. We had questions about the rehab process, and we talked about the prognosis of how I'd be after all this kind of thing. And he laid out all the information carefully. And he probably knew his stuff better than anyone in the whole world. But you know what? He never looked me in the eye once. I thought he was kind of a schmuck. He talked in this flat monotone like he didn't care. So I didn't trust him. Do you think I gave up on the back surgery? Do you think I decided to just stop using my back? I'm just going to use my arms and my legs from now on. No. I found a better doctor. I found a better doctor than the one that failed me. I have a friend. He lives in North Carolina. He was retiring to his dream home. He was building his dream home. He worked with this architect and this builder to make this nice design to fit into the valley with the stream running by. And he wanted to hear the stream, and he wanted to see the birds, and he wanted to live his retirement just reading and writing in this beautiful upstairs that looked out, down the mountain. And the builder came, and the builder laid this great foundation. And the builder started framing the house wonderfully. And once they got to the second floor, something didn't look right. The builder took the second floor and in his plans turned it 90 degrees. He's already halfway done with the house. So my friend just said, I'm not going to retire. I'll just go live in a tent. No. He fired that builder. Went and found a new architect. They redesigned the house based on what was happening there. And he made it the best he could. Now his office looks off this way instead of down the mountain. But you know what? He loves his house. He's lived there for 15 years. One more salient example. I know a lot of people who are hurt by religion, and you do too. I know people who think that faith doesn't have a point at all because they've never seen much of a point, and frankly, Sunday mornings are kind of boring. You know those people too. All they've ever heard about faith is negative. But does that mean they should give up on religion, or should they find a better version of religion? Should they give up on God, or should they find better ideas about God? Should they just accept, I'll be a better person, whatever path I can take? Or should they seek better expressions of love than they've seen, and better questions about faith than they've heard, and better people to share their journey with than the people they see on TV doing a bad job of representing the faith? If you search for a new doctor or a new builder or a new understanding of God, it's going to turn things upside down. And maybe you used to struggle with religion because, it seems like all those religious extremists out there, they're all about hate. And when you start to search for a new idea of God, you discover and realize that there are religious extremists out there all over the world, all over history, who are extreme about peace. Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Mandela, you put in your own hero. Those are the measure of extreme religiosity. And if we expect religion to have any point in the world or in our lives, let's look at their lives. It's a great place to start and look for it. Not at the anger and the exclusivity and the rules and the joyless focus on some other life, but on love and on service, on transformation, and good news for all people now. Personally, I think religion has done more good in the world. The good has outweighed the bad. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't need to fight that battle to weigh those things. But more importantly, I firmly believe that the hope for good in religion, in a faithful life, far outweighs the certainty of bad that we all come across. The perspective of looking for good in the world and making the good in the world is, in my opinion, far more powerful than the simple fact that bad things happen. And that's probably a theme in every religion. I haven't studied all of them, but it is a central story that Christians tell, that evil does not win. That's Easter. Maybe that's the point of faith. To trust in a world, call it God, call it whatever, maybe that's our point. To trust in a world so full of beauty and joy that we cannot help but take part in it. And maybe the point of putting all that stuff into the shape of a religion is to enact the trust into a pursuit of truth and grace. I'm going to say that again because there's a whole bunch of definitions all at once. This is just my guess, my reply to the what's the point question. But maybe the point of faith is to trust in a world so organized by beauty and joy that we cannot help but take part in the pursuit of those values. And maybe the point of putting all that stuff together into the shape of a religion, for all the good and bad that comes of that, is to try to enact that trust into a pursuit of grace and truth. We could do that a lot, and it's not going to go perfect. We try that. Very committed people try to do that. They pursue God. And when we try to do that, we end up with church. And when we end up with church, we end up dealing with people. And when we end up dealing with people, we end up dealing with opinions. And we end up dealing with different opinions, we end up with conflict. When we end up dealing with conflict, even very good people committed to God and the church find ways to express that. They get messy and get ugly, and it can turn people off and make them question again, what's the point of putting up with all this stuff? Maybe I should just do this on my own, find my own spiritual path. Well, here are the ways, 3 ways at least, even if you're totally on board with God, that we in a church can get stuck being fussy and losing sight of the point. First of all, just about nothing in the world has split more churches than that over there. Not Daniel, but music. Music. There's nothing in the world that split more churches. It's kind of petty that it does that, but some of you like our music here, some of you don't like it. Either way, I'm not going to let music get in the way of us enacting truth and grace together. So in your bulletin, there's a little survey. If you're listening online, there's a little survey on Facebook. It will be today. There's a little survey on our website. You can find it anyway. Just tell us what music brings you closer to God. We'll put it in here. We'll make it happen. We'll bring you closer to God however we can. We're not going to let that be a source of contention for us. But another big way that gets in the way for churches, even churches that care so much about God, is money. Money gets in the way. And I'm not talking about televangelists who embezzle. I'm not talking about pastors who build these multi-million-dollar mansions. I'm not concerned with those jerks. I'm concerned with the hundreds and the thousands of tiny churches that they're small and they can't pay their bills anymore. And they can't raise the funds to serve people the way that they really want to be able to serve people. And folks start drifting out the doors, and the pews get emptier, and the offering plates get lighter. Some more people leave, and they can't maintain their building, and people drift away, and the church fails. This church is not near failing, and if you look around, our pews are full. We couldn't fit 10 more people in here today without having to set up some chairs. You might think that because of that, our church is flush with cash. Shaky head over here says, no. The session just wants you to know. They don't want to preach to you. They don't want me to preach to you about this, but they want you to know that money is kind of a problem around here. And Wes will show you the books. Wes will show you the books so you can see that we run a tight ship. We don't waste money on stuff. But we're also budgeted this year, as we were last year, and as we probably will be next year, we're budgeted to run a deficit. And despite all the good things that are going on here, there's new members, there's younger people coming, there's tons of guests, there's mission trips, there's active youth, there's fellowship groups, there's awesome mission things in the summer, there's children's programs. Despite all of that, it's been going up, the giving has stayed about here. And some of you keep it here because you give so well, and thank you. Thank you to everyone who's given and increased their pledges to make it sustainable to this church to be here. But some of you probably, I assume, some of you have no idea about our situation. You have no idea that the church is in this kind of situation, and you love this church, and you suppose other people just keep it afloat. Well, now you know. And if you decide at all to increase your giving, we're not going to waste it. If you decide to support this church as part of your holy pledge, as your expression of giving to God, well, we're going to serve the people of Nederland better, and we're going to give kids an opportunity to do mission, and we're going to make sure this building stays here for worship and for Boy Scouts and for the 10 other community groups that use it, and we are going to make sure that this church stays here for generations to come, if money isn't a problem for us. Third thing that gets in the way, even for well-meaning, faithful people, committed to God, committed to religion. We've got music, we got money, and we got mumbo jumbo. It's all that religious stuff. There's just so many weird things that happen in church. I mean, words like truth and grace. What am I talking about? And preachers who go on for so long, and prayers that we say together, and all this stuff we bring up here at the beginning of a worship service. Some of that's just weird. So when I visit other churches, some of their stuff turns me off. Some of this must turn you off. Some of the language we use for God or for any of that stuff might just make you cringe. Probably the weirdest thing that churches do, probably the weirdest thing that we do in this church is this little ritual we're going to do at this table over here. We do it every month. Some people do it every week. We call it communion or Lord's Supper. Some people call it Eucharist. Some people, we dip our bread in juice and we eat it and we go back to our seats and we listen to great music. Other people, they have little wafers and they do it a whole different way. Some people talk about, do this in remembrance of me, words that Jesus said. Others think it has to do with real flesh and blood, which sounds pretty weird to me. Ages ago, this whole ritual became a stumbling block for people. It still is. But especially when the preacher would stand up and say, "This is my body broken for you." People would say, "That's ridiculous. This is my body broken for you." But the thing is the preacher would say it in Latin, and it sounded like this: "Hoc est corpus meum." And so the people who thought it was silly, they started saying, "Well, that's so silly. Let's call it hocus pocus." That's where we get the hocus pocus. That's where the word comes from. Is that ritual was holding people back from experiencing God. But I assure you that there is no magic here. There's nothing special about that bread. Jim Stevens, I think, baked it last night. Did Jim bake it last night? He does it all the time. He didn't do any incantations and hand thingies. The juice, the Vacation Bible School kids drank all our grape juice, so Frank had to run out right before worship and buy new grape juice. The rest of it is sitting right behind Gail back there. Came from B&F? Yeah. Nothing special, nothing magic about it. This ritual, this weird churchy thing, does not need to be a stumbling block. At its best, at its most pure, it is simply our way of enacting the deepest story that Christians tell, that evil does not win. This is our little marker that says evil will not take over our life. This is our signpost as we go forward to remind us and to remind the world that as dirty and painful as it can be, we have the power to overcome. So just as Jesus' disciples were called to remember that truth, that we have the power to overcome, they were called to remember that after Jesus' death. We are called to remember and live into the hope that something here matters. You matter to God. And this meal is our way to say that even with all the questions and the confusion and the doubt and the hesitation, we want God to matter to us too. Friends, this is the joyful feast of the people of God. They will come from east and west and north and south to sit at the table. All are invited to share this feast which God has prepared. Join me, please, in prayer.